welcome wherever you're watching this program. NJ Ayuk is Executive Chairman of African Energy Chamber, who organized recently a 2-day conference in Juba, South Sudan, with the goal of uniting Africa and the future of our energy sector. The 2-day conference ended in South Sudan was focusing on global energy security sector and environmental security. Joining me is Mr. NJ Ayuk. Mr. NJ Ayuk, and welcome to SFBC in this special program.
Thank you for having me.
It's a great pleasure having you to talk to you about your personal journey toward African geology. And I understand that you have been moving around the African countries with the slogan of Africa We Want. What is the mandate of African Energy Chamber?
First of all, it's so great to be in South Sudan, and it's been really amazing to see a lot of good progress that has happened in the country since I was here last year. South Sudan is one of the most amazing places to see. If you drink that water from the Nile, you come back. The African Energy Chamber, our biggest mandate is to galvanize the African continent and to really drive up free markets, limited governments, individual liberties, rule of law, boost up our energy industry. That means oil and natural gas and even coal and even renewables, to really drive to ensure that natural resources and African producers do serve the people, because the people are the custodians of these resources. But most importantly, it is about making energy poverty history. It is unacceptable that we still have 600 million people in the entire African continent with no access to electricity, 900 million with no access to clean cooking. We cannot speak of anything when we want to meet the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals without solving this problem. And also dealing with climate change. Climate change is a big issue. So the Chamber has a mandate to drive it. We want a balanced transition, and that's why we go around Africa. That's why we go into small cities and villages, knock on every door, and really ensure that we drive Africa forward.
That's great. Let's look at the just 2 days complete conference in South Sudan. How is African Energy Chamber going to contribute toward improving South Sudan in terms of oil, because South Sudan as a leading country, producing oil country?
Yeah, you know, when you look at South Sudan being a producing oil country, we have to take into consideration where South Sudan stands. South Sudan stands at a position where South Sudan is producing 170 barrels of oil per day. Now, the most important issue right now, as you heard over the last 2 days, is that we need to increase production. And if you have to increase production, you really have to drive up exploration. You really have to drive up people doing enhanced oil recoveries, but also you need to also drive up local content at the same time. You need to be able to drive up exploration activities, but push the role of women. Where do we go from here? That should be the big question. The big question of where we go from here at this time has to be getting everybody involved, looking at a transition, but it has to be a just energy transition. And South Sudan stands at that point to really drive it. The theme of this big event was about, South Sudan gateway to East Africa. This is the largest producer in East Africa. This is also the biggest, besides being the biggest producer, but also being the legacy producer. The skills are here. The know-how are here. They can really be that hub that drives production all across East Africa.
Is African Energy Chamber only advocating in oil sector?
Everything. And I'll tell you why. Energy shapes Africa. Energy drives the world. Energy drives what we do. So no matter what we do, when we look at the energy sector, it's so critical. So if you're looking at Africa, where you have 17 nations that are producers of energy, what do? It's not just oil and gas. You are going to need oil and natural gas, that we have them in abundance. to really transform into reshaping our governance. It will really transform into building our economies, to really transition us into bringing renewables into our economies, and also help us get a lot more other things. So it's not what we've missed with the oil industry in the past is that we've just not seen that role that oil plays in really reviving our economies. What is beautiful right now is that you have a younger generation that sees oil as an addition, and those addition comes with how we change and improve good governance, how we drive prosperity, and how we encourage success among young people. That is the oil of the future. That is the energy industry of the future. But each one of us, every South Sudanese, every African has to participate in that.
You had been to Djibouti recently for the same, World Conference on Energy and Power, and the energy transition in Africa explained on different views on the power and energy transition. What is the role of companies involved in energy transition in this?
Well, what you have to see the role of companies involved in energy transition is that the oil and gas industry has been an industry that has really mobilized the world, driven a lot of participation on things that are happening. We have the technologies of the future. We have been able to see, I'll give you an example, carbon capturing. If you are able to take care of greenhouse gas emissions by capturing, using carbon capturing technologies, they will be able to reduce that greenhouse gas emission coming out of oil fields. But also one of the key things that you have to look at is to find ways to do sustainable oil and gas exploration and production in a cleaner, better, environmentally friendlier fashion. But then we have to also look at different reasons. These companies that have big research and development facilities, you use that to drive up a lot of energy transition technologies that would save the world. But it's an amazing opportunity for us to actually drive new kind of economies, new things that we're doing to be able to build that and make that successful.
What encouraged you to step out for Pan-Africanism in the energy sector?
Well, I'm an African. And when you're an African, you cannot be that generation that wants to see the Africa we deserve, the Africa we want, and not step up. Nobody's going to do it for us. Nobody's going to change it for us. We all have an obligation to do better and to come back and leave something. But also it's time that we step up and do something bigger than our own personal interests. And that's why if you've been blessed, like I have been blessed, with a lot of skills and opportunities, you pull others in and you drive this big cause, because again, it's not acceptable to have 600 million people without access to electricity. It's just not acceptable. But also we have to change the narrative about what energy means for Africans and our people. We're dealing in a moment where young Africans are choosing to go across the Sahara or the Mediterranean to look for greener pastures in Europe when they can find opportunities in Africa. But we need to create those opportunities, encourage success, nurture it, drive it forward. That is what being an African means. That is what driving our industry forward means. But also we have to ensure that young people, when they think about our continent, they become those change agents that are going to develop. You have to be careful. We have 60 to 70% of Africa today is young people under 25. We have to really ask ourselves those difficult questions. What are we giving them? Are we preparing them for the future? Are we preparing them to compete? Today, we're not just competing between a South Sudanese and a Kenyan or a Ghanaian. You're competing with somebody in Japan, in China, in America. And this generation where with social media and everything, we can reach out. That is so critical. And we cannot be that generation that takes Africa backward. We need to move it forward. We need to encourage it. but we also need to hold ourselves accountable that you do that with opportunity.
But again, looking at the status of young people in Africa, most of the young people are so vulnerable in terms of manpower and accessibility to so many, opportunities, so that they be able to excel out from from continents to a different continent. How do you encourage these young people who might be losing hope that it's not a profit for them now at this time to do this, but because of the ABCD they're lacking manpower to go on and do excellent jobs like what you are doing? What can you tell to that such young people?
The first thing is that you find all the opportunities you can have to get the skills, the training, but also you got to be willing to go out there and hustle. All right, you got to be willing to go out there and fight. First thing is also, second thing also is that you got to be willing to get up in the morning at 4 o'clock in the morning and take that 4 o'clock in the morning wake up call and push. Don't wait for someone to hand it to you. They're not going to hand it to you. You're going to have to fight to get it. But then we also have to hold our communities, our energy industry, our governments accountable. What do they have to do? They would have to do a lot of training, because we need to build skills. The skills gap is so big. And if there's anything we need to give to young people right now, especially in the energy sector, we need to close the skills gap. Do you know that the industry right now, the way it is, you've had a lot of people who have been around the oil and gas industry and they are retiring. And because they're retiring, we're going to have big amount of skill shortages. And today, our industry has done a horrible job at that. More young people today want to work for Google and Amazon instead of Exxon or Chevron. That needs to change. But the future of this industry is going to be African. And it being African is that you already having a lot of African superstars, African independent companies, African producers, African trading companies, African service companies. So what does that mean? We gather our people, we train them, we improve them, we encourage them, we hold them accountable, and then we push them. Because when these young people are making money, when these young people are driving opportunities, they are building their countries, because they become the new founding fathers. Because we've won the political struggles of the past, we've had independence, but then we need to fight now for economic empowerment and economic justice. And that is going to be the next struggle of a Pan-Africanist movement. And it starts with energy and empowering young people to be these drivers that drive our continent for the future.
So briefly, could you tell us the state of gas and oil, in Africa and the continent?
We've had a resilient industry. If you look at it from South Sudan, you saw an industry that went from 300,000 to 170,000 right now. And from the last 2 days, there is a plan to go up to 240,000 barrels a day in production. The industry has been very volatile. You've seen the price at the pump for everyday people get high. Brent is at $100. You've seen natural gas prices gone up to some cases $66 per MMBTU. So you've seen a big rise in demand, but also shortage in production. The underinvestment in the industry over the last 10 years because of radical extremist climate policies that have come from Western countries has also killed the industry. They've cut out financing for African oil and gas industry. They have tried to stop projects. So that has really hurt poor countries like South Sudan and other African countries from increasing energy projects that would really close the gap between production and also moving us into renewables. The African energy oil and gas sector remains resilient. We have some of the biggest gas discoveries in the world, some of the biggest oil discoveries in the world, but we need to move from suspect to prospects. We need to close that gap and really start producing more. That's one of the reasons why we're creating our own African Energy Bank, so that we can finance our own production rather than wait for others to do for us what we can do for ourselves.
Many African investors, especially the native African, they believe so much that whatever we make in Africa, or our products, our technology, our innovations, is not more stronger than what we export or import from other continents. For example, China, UK, and all this. And Africans are working hard to put an African agenda of seeing the Africa they want themselves. This is an African where the technology is being provided by Africans, the idea is being provided by Africans, the governance system, and then the economy is improved by their own African. So looking at this future of African energy sector, how do you say is the future of Africa in the next 10 years in terms of investors improvement, life African improvement, oil and gas improvement, and economic improvement by Africans themselves?
It starts with you, it starts with me, it starts with young people. And what do I mean by that? It's very easy. We create opportunities for young Africans. We create opportunities to drive that up. But this is what is also important. When we make it difficult for international investors to come into a country like South Sudan or any African country to invest, we're making it difficult for South Sudanese and Africans. Because you cannot love jobs and hate those who create jobs. You cannot love investment and hate those who invest money. We need to make it comfortable for people. Right now in Africa, we have the biggest free trade market in the world. With the passage of the African Continental Free Trade Act, that is going to let goods, services go around Africa without cuts out tariffs. It would create an economic zone of 1.4 billion people. That's massive. Imagine 1.4 billion people today, we're not able to trade with one another. But also we need to get rid of these visas, because these visas are not designed by us. These borders are not designed by us. We need to get rid of that. But then let's not worry about crude oil or gas going to Europe and China and other places. What about the people in this continent? We need to be able to still sell at the same price, competitive rates, market rates, by building our own refineries, our own fertilizer plants. So one of the most beautiful things I like about this is gas. Instead of flaring gas, we could capture gas that's been flared and polluting the environment and create a big, massive industry, gas. And that gas industry, what do? We build fertilizer plants, urea, ammonia, NPK. What does that do? It helps us boost agriculture. And when you boost agriculture, we create more jobs. Instead of going to beg for food in Europe, we are using our vast land to really drive up agriculture. Employment happens with that. We feed our people, we're self-sufficient, we're sustainable, and then the economy is going. So we have to look at those multipliers. And when we do that, that's where we're going. That's the vision and that's the future I see Africa going the next 10 years. We have to take care of ourselves rather than waiting. They've given us so much foreign aid, so much charity. It has gotten us nowhere. So we need to abandon that mindset of waiting to always go out there and beg and get charities. We need to start focusing a lot on building for ourselves, personal responsibility. All these aid workers, they have not helped us.
Thank you. Dear viewers, wherever you're watching this, this is SSBC coming to you live from capital Juba. Of course, I'm so grateful to have this young, energetic man, of course, who is putting more effort to see the Africa we want in the next coming years. NJ is also the chairman of African Energy Chamber, and of course, this is an African agenda that is putting much on how we can invest on our own energy and oil sector. And we're grateful to host him in this episode of SSBC. And of course, he will still tell us more about his journey. Of course, he has been moving around African countries to make sure that he mobilize, informs, and educate people about the importance of this sector. NJ, of course, in the conference, if I quote, you have talked about South Sudan sanction to be lifted. Do you think if the sanction in South Sudan or to individual or to government or to institution lifting will change the narrative of African face?
Absolutely. I mean, South Sudan is a place where those sanctions have to go. they have to go. They are not helping the country. They are not helping the energy industry. Your sanctions are not helping the country transition even into a greener economy. Because to go into a greener economy, you're going to need technology, you're going to need investments. But if the sanctions are all about blocking investments from happening to this country, then it is a big problem. So what do? Our democratic systems are still improving. It's a young country that deserves a chance. The sanctions were there to really prevent, to get a peace agreement, to prevent a war from going. That war has stopped. I'm in Juba today. It is as peaceful as you can get. But there's still a lot of political discussions in order to have a unified government and have a more inclusive nature of the industry. But I think that the United States of America is a country that has been a friend of South Sudan. The United States of America is a country that really drives democratic traditions. And being able to really lift these sanctions, work together with government, and close the gaps, it will be a massive help in this country as it moves forward to improve its industry. But let's also be honest, Americans have some of the best technologies that can really encourage oil and natural gas exploration in South Sudan. These sanctions are cutting Americans from having projects, jobs, opportunities, creating opportunities in America for themselves. And also it is scaring away investors. So when we say these sanctions need to go, it's because we want to take away the chokehold on investments. We want to ensure that this country can leapfrog into the future. But it's also a responsibility to leadership that they have to ensure that we don't get back to a position where the United States, a very friendly nation to South Sudan, it's a brother of South Sudan, that your brother has to say, we're going to sanction you. But this is an opportunity, and I make this appeal to the American government, American people. It's time to say this has to go and really give this country an opportunity to drive forward and create opportunity for a lot of poor people. Do you know in South Sudan, this country has only about 40 megawatts of electricity, and that's just 40 megawatts. The London airport uses more electricity than the entire South Sudan. So you're looking at, outside Juba, you're looking at maybe millions of people without access to any kind of electricity. This cannot go on. We need American technologies. We need American sanctions to go away so that we can supercharge and super drive an energy revolution in this country.
You've been traveling around African countries. The African Energy Chamber, of course, as a leading institution that is taking leads in Africa. Can you briefly tell us some of the overall achievement you have finally, have reached in this all-round trip?
I think our biggest achievement has need and the creation of an African energy bank, because financing of our energy future is going to be key. You can have all the projects, but if you have no money, nothing is going to happen. In Europe today, they are going to create a hydrogen bank to finance hydrogen production. They are taking care of themselves. We in Africa need to have that. I'm so proud. I was so proud being in Angola when I saw African Petroleum Producers Organization represented by great African Dr. Omar Farouk, together with Afro-Exim Bank signing that agreement, and they're going to move forward. But also, we've been able to really put energy poverty on the agenda, on the global agenda, because you cannot talk about climate change without dealing with energy poverty. But then the word just energy transition, we've been able to put that on the global agenda. It's not an energy transition. It got to be just, it got to be inclusive, and that is really key. But one of our key accomplishments is driving up local content, providing millions of dollars in financing to local companies to be able to grow, to be able to get access to opportunities, to get them in the industry, really creating space for women in oil and gas, and saying we want some certain targets for women in oil and gas when it comes to training. Then having our young people's leadership program, where we get young people coming out of school We negotiate with oil companies. We drive them there through internships and secondments and get them moving. Negotiating with different oil producers, companies, countries to have an African exchange, so we get young people maybe from one country to go into facilities in another country to experience that, so that they know what this means, not just reading this stuff in the book and practicing that. That every day, break by break, block by block engagement is what drives the African Energy Chamber, and we have to continue pushing forward because, the arc of a moral universe, as Dr. King says, is long, but it bends toward justice. It doesn't bend by itself. We have to help push it that way. We have to drive it that way, and that oil industry of the future is going to be us driving it that way.
There are plans of African Energy Chamber in future, or a plan being approached that they want to develop institutions that work on oil and energy sector in Africa?
We stand for something. We don't get into politics, because when you get into politics, it becomes so difficult. I imagine me being a politician. I'll be so horrible at it. They would drive me out of it. But we stand for something. Free markets. We've tried charity. It has failed. Charity has failed. It has not helped Africans. So we got to encourage free markets. We got to encourage government to cut spending, like reckless spending, and invest more into infrastructure and human capital, human growth. And that is what we need to drive. But limited government. I don't want government making decisions about who I hire and who I don't hire and how to run my company. I want governments to provide me security and get out, so young people can run their business and find ways to get things. Individual liberty, rule of law. Rule of law is so important. A free and structured market is essential, but an enabling environment is so critical, is so important in order to spur growth, so that people can come from any walks of life and be something. That, when we start driving that, we're encouraging something. We're getting everyday people like me, who nobody ever gave a shot, to be able to go out there and be like what Rudyard Kipling and say, I could walk with kings, but never losing the common touch, but still be able to do that.
I understand there's upcoming conference in South Africa in the October. So what is the agenda of the conference?
It is about creating an enabling environment while producing more energy. We need to create an enabling environment, because we got to admit, if we don't make it easier to do deals and to do business and to operate and to hold, then we finish. The oil and gas industry is transitioning into a future industry. If you have billions of barrels under the ground and you're not making it easy for companies to invest, operate, work, grow, then you're killing yourself. You're shooting yourself in your own foot. So we need to make it easy. We need to encourage investments. We need to get people working. We need to push governments to say, don't sit back there, because you get bureaucrats sometimes thinking that they own these resources. No, it belongs to the people. It's not your job to hold back deals from going. We're going to encourage that. We're going to have young people signing deals with other African companies and international European companies, signing deals together so they become partners. So if you lack skills, we'll get you with people who have the right kind of skills, the right kind of technical abilities, so we can drive up our work. And those partnerships are important. But then we're also going to get a lot of young people meeting together, deciding on the future, but then really looking at financing our energy and closing that gap. But what is most important, we want people to do deals. We want people to have opportunities and jobs. And so we can close the gap between struggle and success. If we do that, and I think we'll accomplish that during the African Energy Week.
I think this is your second time to be in South Sudan, right?
No, it's not my second time. I was here before independence, and
really?
I've been coming every year, and nobody will stop me from coming.
And then as also a person of African ideology, what can you advise, or what can you tell the other investors that are willing to come and invest in South Sudan in terms of security, in terms of governance, in terms of peoples, and in terms of environments, and in terms of life changing and...
First of all, South Sudan has amazing opportunities, and amazing opportunities for you to get better returns, bigger and better returns on investment. But bigger than that, it has amazing people. Those amazing people that are willing to, they put their heart out there, they embrace you and really want to drive you to go forward. That is the South Sudan I encourage investors to come. When it comes to governance, I've met with the Minister of Investment. I've seen what they're trying to put together with a one-stop shop to make it 1 to 2 days to register a company and then be able to drive up companies, set up banking, and really ensure that they can drive up business. That's encouraging. I appreciate that. But when it comes to taxes, they're finding ways to be competitive, and they have a competitive tax regime that is making it easier for business to come in. Connection, more flights, more connected than most other African countries have been in. You're seeing growth. Commercial properties in the countries is taking off, and they're really pushing with that. There is peace, there is stability, but there's also a willingness to never get back to the dispute. Everybody is tired of any kind of dispute. That is encouraging to me. That makes me feel safe, happy to put my money, and encourage everybody to put their money in this country and really drive it up. Because the only way we're going to have better governance and peace and security and better stability is when we take that chance, work with our dollars, put our dollars and drive up growth and drive up prosperity. You do that, not only will you get bigger returns, but you will be meeting those ESG provisions that we want to get, but you will be among people who are as beautiful, as welcoming as what you want to see.
Thank you so much, NJ, for joining us.
Thank you so much. It's
also to have
such
you
an
in this
honor. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Really appreciate it.
Thank you.